that could help in mitigating the adverse environmental impacts caused by conventional. Towards this, Government of India had notified the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan 2020, which seeks to enhance national energy security, mitigate adverse environmental impacts from road transport vehicles, and boost domestic manufacturing capabilities for electric vehicles. Government of India has the national target of achieving 30% EV sales penetration by 2030 and launched National Mission on Transportation Mobility and Battery Storage to promote localization of EV component manufacturing. And needless to say, Delhi is leading its way in that. In addition to this, government has also notified phase 2 of faster adoption of manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles scheme to stimulate the market of electric vehicles in the country. Delicense the manufacturing infrastructure, business, and specified guidelines and standards for charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, thereby opening up the market of public charging infrastructure and ensuring a roadmap development of charging infrastructure, and induced various financial incentives to reduce upfront cost of EVs and charging infrastructure. Alongside the various central level interventions, several states have also notified their respective policies for promoting electric vehicles, which cover subsidy and tax exemptions, among the other incentives for consumers, buyers, and suppliers. However, even with all these efforts in place, the markets for EVs in India hasn't been as expected. Although the numbers of EVs are rising in the country, its total share in vehicle sale is minuscule. While the Government of India has taken crucial steps toward faster adoption of EVs, there are several challenges and gaps existing in EV ecosystem that must be addressed. To address these challenges by taking a systematic approach, CII has set up a collaboration industry platform on sustainable transportation, which aims to bring together industries from the EV value chain to engage, identify, and address the current bottlenecks faced in transition to electric vehicles and collaborate on generating industry-led solutions. It is believed that this platform will stimulate concentrated and coordinated efforts by policymakers, regulator utilities, OEMs, and other value chain players to understand the existing gaps in current landscapes of the EV industry and key action items required for enabling the needful. Engaging industries from this sector is pivotal in overcoming the barriers to scale, designing and implementing new solutions to achieve sectoral transformation towards e-mobility. This platform is catalytic in generating new ideas using a systematic, research-driven and coordinated approach. It integrates the learning from EV industries, initiatives in specific geographies and of EV components and or delivery models of at the national level to promote peer learning and cross-fertilization of ideas. I firmly believe that the new EV policy created by the Delhi government will not only help environment, this will also help stakeholders from EV industry to grow and have better coverage. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of CII to thank Shri Kailash Gehlot ji, Transport Environment Minister of Government and City of Delhi, for ensuring Delhi to lead the country in rapidly transitioning to electric vehicles. I would also congratulate Mr. Naveen Munjal for taking a leadership position from industry side and for facilitating a positive ecosystem for all the stakeholders involved in EV, especially in two-wheeler segment. I would like to thank all the speakers who have joined us for the conference today. I would also like to place on record my appreciation for the companies who have come forward to share their efforts and knowledge, which allows others to learn from it. I would also like to thank people who have come and learn and understand by participating in such programs so that they could go back to their workplaces better informed about the topics. Lastly, I would like to thank CII who continue to make efforts in untiring manner. I'm sure that the efforts will continue and we will see members making greater efforts in this direction. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the sponsors, event powered by Hydro Electric, Reliance, BP Mobility Limited, MapmyIndia, Miclo Mobility, JK Cement, Samtel Avionics, Icon, Alok, Master Batches, Cleanfo India, Land LearnTap, Ford School of Management, and KPMG, our knowledge partner, who have been a great support to the program. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Puneet. Thank you, Mr. Shah. Thank you, Mr. Kundra. Thank you, Abhimanyu and Puneet, for your opening remarks. I would also like to announce that CII Delhi will be hosting a panel, and we would like to invite the industry and the government to be a part of this exclusive group where we talk about how to electrify Delhi. So that's something that we would be sending out information on at the subsequent time. I would now like to start the event today by inviting the next session, which is on EV marketing and commercialization, making EVs for everybody. This is being moderated by Mr. Surinder Gill, and we've got the panelists also here. So, Mr. Gill, are you here?
Sir, he is logging in. So there's a 5-minute buffer time. So I'm just letting all the panelists to come in and start the session in 5 minutes.
All right. So if you can just stay on the group, please. You can just stay on this chat. They will be logging in, as Vishal said. They'll be logging in the next few minutes.
We would request all participants to please stay back. We will be starting our next session in next 2-3 minutes, please. Please stay tuned.
Mr. Gill, Mr. Sharma, good morning. Am I audible, please?
Yes, you are. Good morning.
Good morning. Can I request the panelists to please switch on their camera?
Okay.
We are just waiting for two more, the other panelists to join, and we'll go live.
Good morning, Mr. Gill.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
जी
Sharma.
जी
How are you? May I request panelists to just switch on the camera? We are going live now. And very quickly, good morning, everyone. I'm Vishal, and we are starting our first session of the inaugural. And I'm just sharing the panelists who will be joining us. A warm welcome to everyone. We have Mr. Sohinder Gill, the moderator of the session. He is the CEO of Hero Electric Vehicles Private Limited. And he is also a very important link of in the sector, as he's part of the Hero Electric. Also, he's also wearing a hat of SMEV, the Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles, and he's the Director General for that body, working very closely on this in the sector. A very well-known face, and no need for more introduction. People know him very well. Good morning, Mr. Gill. Thank you for joining us.
Morning. Am I visible on the camera, or should I log in again?
Sir,
I think
you're
so.
not visible at present, please.
Okay, I'll log in again then. Fine. Carry on
Yes,
with the
please.
introductions, please.
Yes, please. Good morning, Mr. Sujay Sharma, joining us from Reliance BP Mobility Limited, RBML. He is a Chief Development Officer. Mr. Sharma is operating under the brand name of GOBP. He leads the low carbon business agenda for the JV, including electrification and gas in transport. With a 20 plus years of experience in energy sector, he is a BP cadre and spent his career handling leadership roles in various geographies, including the US, UK, and India. He's joining us from UK right now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, guys.
We have Ms. Sapna Ahuja. She is the Chief Operating Officer from MapmyIndia with a 17 plus years of experience. Ms. Sapna will be bringing the perspective of MapmyIndia relevant with the for the EV summit. She holds a bachelor's degree of science in computer sciences and a master's degree of science in applied operations research from the University of Delhi. He serves on the road safety subcommittee formed at another number of formers and has been a frequent speaker in various conferences and industry. Good morning, Ms. Sapna.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
We have also Mr. Abhishek Ranjan. He is Additional Vice President and Head Renewable DSM and EE Energy Analytics from BRPL. He has about 2 decades power and IT sectors in India. He is currently leading a team in the area of energy efficiency, demand side management, and he is a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from NIT Bhopal. So, good morning, Mr. Gill, to please start the proceeding. Thank you.
Well, is my voice echoing? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Fine.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. My pleasure to be on board, and transformation, transportation, specifically in the electric space, right? So to begin with, a little bit of my ideas that over here, now there are two stakeholders. One is the guy who is buying the vehicle and using it for his livelihood. And the second one is the consumer. And we have to debate today that how do we make that guy who is using the vehicle, buying the vehicle, to attract him to convert from fuel-based to electric. So I would like to start with Sujay about your ideas. I believe you are going big way into swapping and trying to turn the business into commercial in your own way. So I would like you to share the thoughts.
Thanks, Mr. Gill. I think in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, there's always this chicken and egg dilemma, I guess, in every country that's been there. I mean, it's the same in it's been the same in China. It's been the same, frankly, in the UK. I think we see the struggle sort of in the UK still, even with issues such as I think Mr. Munjal and others talked about this around range anxiety. And that is a critical element to resolve. That's if we want to be successful in the EV business and we want EV adoption to take place at scale, outside of the vehicles being economical, which they will have to be for adoption in India, I think we'll have to get rid of or find ways to get take care of the range anxiety issues. And that is going to require quite a bit of investment, not just as you referred, Mr. Gill, in battery swapping, but also in fixed charging. I think today we have what I would describe as a lot of sort of best efforts being made to put charging infrastructure in, to put swapping infrastructure in. My perception is that it needs to be sort of more systematic and considered. I mean, the network planning, for example, needs to really be thought about. How should we think about creating the right sort of density in the right cities? What is that density? What is the right technology as well? Is it a slow charger, for example, that is adequate for someone who's on the go? Or do we need fast chargers? And if it's fast chargers, are the vehicles capable of taking them? So there's this whole question of addressing range anxiety for the consumers. There's the question of what's the right network for the consumers, and there's the question of how do you, of course, make affordable vehicles that have the right charging speeds, etc., for the consumers as well. So all of these aspects, I think, need to come together to create the right ecosystem for adoption. Otherwise, we'll sort of struggle to create to move forward at pace. I think Mr. Gill perhaps dropped. I don't see him on the screen.
No, he's back.
Coming back. He's coming
He's
back.
back. Yeah.
Hello,
Mr. Gill,
I got disconnected.
Sorry.
No
problem. I think I answered the question. I said sort of 2 or 3 factors. We've got to get the right network planning. We've got to get the right assets on the ground and create enough density. And I think we've got to have the right vehicles that can provide the convenience of charging speeds, etc., to get moving. That can top up and move on, rather than put a bunch of slow chargers in that will take 5, 6, 7, whatever number of hours to create that right kind of charge for the vehicle. So that's my viewpoint. Welcome comments from Abhishek, Sapna, and others.
Well, I was just thinking about all this business, because I am an OEM and I am also in the association. So we keep hearing so much of inputs about B2B to make it a success. I believe that ultimately it is that one guy who has to buy the vehicle, the owner. And unless he sees a proposition in buying it, we are all trying to create that proposition for him. So to think about the psyche of this one individual, a guy who's a low middle income group guy who has come for his livelihood and he wants to make an earning out of his delivery business. We are all trying, from OEMs to ultimate Amazon's Flipkarts to DSPs to people like you, service providers, fleet operators, financiers, so many people now. But if I compare that to an individual need of that guy, today he's using a second-hand vehicle, which is 25,000 rupees, right? And he's happily making some livelihood out of it because the capex is so low and he is not bothered about many things. The vehicle lasts for a few years and then resale value he gets out of it and he earns. So my question to Abhishek would be now that from that hat, if there are 5 stakeholders in trying to make one guy buy the vehicle, and all of us are trying to make a business also out of it and make some profits out of it, is there enough to share amongst us and ultimately also attractive to that one guy who is today not at all thinking about buying electric, because there are not many on the road, because there is no proof of concept for him, because for him a personal vehicle like a motorcycle is also a vehicle for his girlfriend, wife, or his family. So what do you think all of us are trying to do, and what is your specific thinking about it?
Well, thank you, Mr. Gill. Hope I'm audible.
Sure.
This is a perfect case, which I was also thinking that it's all about customer experience. So we have to think of that person in the center of the entire ecosystem and see what all can be done for him when we step into his shoes or her shoes. Now, appropriately said, 25K is the kind of vehicle he's driving, second-hand vehicle, and he would like to see the same kind of value and output from it. So we have to break down this problem into multiple steps. So first step is how to convince her to switch to this new mode of communication or transport, and why should. So then we talk about TCO, total cost of ownership, very simplified, made easy kind of for her. We tell her that if you move to this mode of transportation, how easier your life would be. So there is already an experience with her. Now we have to tell her and we have to demonstrate amply, as you said, there is no proof of concept and we are trying to struggle and try to figure it out. We have to tell her that, look, this is how your experience is today and this is going to be a lot better using this. One could be like, for example, on-demand range at the choice of your place, at the choice of your time, anywhere. So that is one proposition what EVs bring in. C is the vehicle per se. I mean, she is used to a vehicle, two-wheeler. These are the features which are available in the IC engine vehicles, etc. And then more bang from the buck. So, for example, whatever expenses I have done, what is the kilometer per liter kind of fuel efficiency? Similarly, here kilometer per kilowatt hour of the battery size. So more bang from the battery of the vehicle. So how can we make the specific energy consumption of an electric vehicle so low that the productivity or output from this or the satisfaction of this in terms of monetary satisfaction becomes comparable or even better than that? Because there are studies where they have proven that the TCO of electric vehicle for two-wheeler and three-wheeler is much lower than IC. Finally, no questions about range anxiety. Because we are trying, like for example in Delhi, we are trying to create an ecosystem of wherever you go, wherever you are, you can get the range, ubiquitous charging. So that will solve the problem of range. So now is we have to join hands together saying that, okay, range anxiety is not there. Now what are the choices in the vehicles and what are the plans? For example, why only he has to buy or she has to buy? Is there a plan where we can offer her some kind of EMI clubbed with the scrappage policy of the government of India, and so that a nice packaged deal? As far as demonstration is concerned, yes, we all are trying, like for example, we as a DISCOM, we have been trying to do so for the last 2 years. And we are proud owners of Hero two-wheeler vehicles, for example. For the past 1 year, we have been using it for alignment and the meter readers. And they are out there in the field and they are also spreading the word. So the idea is to get hold of that key stakeholder in each segment of the society, convert her, and then she will be a messenger. So I'll rest my case over here, Mr. K.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good value add. Sapna, I understand you're trying to make a business in your own way through connectivity and through devices and make it as very simple backup support for the B2B business, because you know India more at a back of hand than even Google, perhaps, right? So the patli gali wali sadkein bhi aapko pata hai. So maybe you are adding value from time of efficiencies, etc., right?
Mhm.
So that's one aspect, but wearing a different hat about this whole business. Do you share the same opinion, like Sujay said? And
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll step in here now. I think all the panelists here are on the same page. We definitely, when it comes to e-mobility, we definitely need to think about that one person who's gonna invest in the electric vehicle. There are broadly, if you look at it, there are three stakeholders: the buyer, who is the person that we are talking about. Then there is the OEM, who is manufacturing these vehicles. We have the charge station infrastructure providers. That's the third stakeholder. And fourth, also I'll mention here, fourth is the government. Government also is a big stakeholder because they are the ones who have been promoting it quite heavily, because of course there is the environment. That's the bigger issue which is at stake. Now, coming back to the buyer who is going to make the investment here, and I totally agree with what Abhishek also just mentioned about the range anxiety. Range anxiety, that's the major concern of the user before he would make an investment. I mean, so how can we solve that? That's where the business, or that's where MapmyIndia is coming into the picture. How we can solve that? There are 2-3 aspects. Again, I'll split it into various components. First, is the customer aware where the charge stations are, or are there enough charge stations in the vicinity? First of all, getting this information to him, or either on his mobile phone, or maybe in the vehicle itself, so that he gets that comfort that I'll get this information at the click of a button even when I'm taking this vehicle out. So that's one thing that we are trying to solve. Second is, even if he finds a nearby charge station when he's driving, can he be sure that the charge station is active? Because we know the dynamicity today. There are so many charge stations which have been put up, but nobody is operating them. They are not at all active. So what if he lands up there and it's not working? The second is knowing whether the charge station is working, whether the availability or compatible plug type is there on that charge station or not, having that information. Then can we provide him that ease of booking the charge station using IoT, using sensor technology or not? All these aspects can actually make it very, very easy, very, very comfortable for the customer, in terms of his range anxiety needs. So that's part one. So knowing where the charge stations are. Second is knowing whether the compatible charge stations are available or not. So there is this, the entire EV charge station mobility platform that can help deliver this information right to these customers. Now, even if he has this information, while he's driving, the data point around range that he's getting from the vehicle, how accurate that is? Does that range that you calculate, does it consider the topography of the road in each of the directions? I mean, because we how EVs get impacted, or how the battery charge gets impacted when you're either driving uphill or downhill. So does it consider the topography of the road? That becomes a very important factor, your range calculation algorithm. Does it consider, is it taking the input from the weather? Is it also learning whether how the driver drives? Because driving behavior also impacts the range. So better or more accurate your range calculation algorithm is, more the comfort or more the ease for the user would be. So that's again, now this is the second aspect. First was knowing the charge station, where it is, where the compatible charge stations are. And second is getting the accurate dynamic range on the go while you're driving. You get to see, okay, I can drive up to this point in this direction and up to, let's say, Ames Hospital in this direction. So that's the second aspect. Third is, can I be sure that if I want to go to place A, I have enough charge to go to that place A? Can I do battery efficient navigation using the systems that I have? I mean, we're talking about several systems here. It's a two-wheeler or it's a four-wheeler, it's a three-wheeler. We're talking about all kinds of electric vehicles. But can there be a technology that can help me support with battery efficient routing and battery efficient navigation? That's where, again, there is technology available which can say, okay, fine, if you want to go to point A, that actually falls within the range, and if you want to go to point B, that actually goes beyond the range, for which you'll have to take a detour, you'll have to go to the charge station first, and then you can proceed for your destination. So that's the kind of technology that we have been talking about, and we strongly think that this can help buyer, or this can encourage buyer to opt for electric vehicle, to go and buy, take the decision of buying the electric vehicle. Of course, I also agree with the other factors about the pricing, the cost, convenience, etc. Yeah, hope I've answered your question, sir.
Yeah, surely in a way, but I would like to critique it a little more with you.
Mm-hmm.
See, because we are all talking of that poor guy who otherwise was happily using his whatever he was using, a three-wheeler or a LCV or whatever motorcycle scooter he was using. And now we are giving him some sophisticated aids, some of the cautions, some of the way to drive more efficiently, a big question mark on reliability of the product, overloading mat karna, nahi to ye ho jayega, and then battery swapping. Will I be always be able to run my business because I'll have to rely on a battery swapping which is not in high density? So imagine, again, back to that one guy who is just come to earn that 18,000 rupees a month, and he doesn't have that much of either, that type of a level of thinking or aptitude or application of mind to think of so many things which are required to make that vehicle, that is his personal vehicle or a vehicle given to him. So I believe personally, and this is again open to discussion, that unless that one guy finds that I'm going to own the vehicle rather than I'm being given a vehicle, these things will not happen. Once you own a vehicle, then you start thinking about these things, about maintenance, about the best efficiency and routes. But today, who are owning the vehicles? The delivery boy is not owning the vehicle. Somebody else is giving. Amit is trying to give. Sujay is trying to give batteries. Somebody else is trying to give, fleet operators are trying to give full vehicles with drivers or vehicles at least. So that guy is getting something which it's like a black box for him. And then you tell him, don't use like this, do like this. So it's a big resistance. No? And in that resistance, he perhaps tries to misuse a vehicle or doesn't care about these things. So how this transformation take place? Because then he is like a B2C guy, he's not a B2B guy. As much as a retail guy is buying the vehicle, a B2B guy is also buying individually. If he's buying, then it will happen. So if it happens in B2C, will it happen in B2B is a question here. So back to Sujay, what do you think is the differentiation between B2C customer and a B2B customer when individually he's going to buy? What are the factors that will play in his mind? And how can we support a conversion of an individual preference and purchase about this B2B guy to buy a vehicle on his own and start using his as his personal vehicle, taking care of all the things that Sapna is saying, Abhishek is saying, and make it a good TCO type of a model for himself?
Yeah. So, Mr. Gill, I think you have to the point Abhishek made about customer experience, right? We've got to give a good customer experience, and in my opinion, for a B2B customer, the customer experience is going to come at least in these early days. If you can de-risk the whole process for him or her. Right. So actually, I think trying to convince him or her to buy the vehicle is probably not where I would go with it. I think how do you variabilize this, and how do you create the experience for that person to first use the vehicle so that they can get comfortable with all these points you have mentioned, whether it is the energy is available or it's not available, the infrastructure is available, it's not available, the insurance is available, financing is available, all of these things. If we try to uh, you know, force people to buy vehicles, the only way I think you will get people to buy vehicles, which they've done in China, is you put a mandate in there and you say, if you are in the business of B2B fleets, whether it's four-wheelers, two-wheelers, whatever it is, a certain section of the vehicles have to be electric, and that's the law. That's one way to do it. It might not be a very popular way to do it, and if you do that, it also doesn't necessarily improve the quality of the product, etc. Because uh, there's no incentive, frankly, to do that if it gets forced on as a mandate. So I think the capitalist way to do it, if you have to reflect on that, is that you've got to variabilize and make the product accessible, kind of like Amit Gupta, the Yulu team, others like this are trying to do, is make the vehicle available, give the consumer the experience, let them get comfortable with the product, let them understand the good things about the product, let them understand the challenges with the product. And that's how I believe they'll then migrate to owning the product. But I don't think personally that in the first instance, we can just go to them and say, here, buy a product. And at the same time, now you go and get this meter to get the EV tariff and get the battery from here to get the swapping done, etc., etc. That's a more challenging proposition, as you're also, I think, articulating. So that's my personal view.
Yeah, largely agreed. And I was hoping to have Jasmine on board because there are so many things which are pointing towards policy we are all discussing, and you have pointed out rightly China versus India. But in absence of he being there, we can be more critiquing them perhaps. So I believe firmly, and I would like your views, all of your views, is that policy, especially Delhi, had a very dynamic and a very forward-looking policy, and it did wonders for trying to create awareness as well as the first mover advantage in seeing what is really required for the customer in the B2C space, which means sticker price. So they gave additional subsidy, and the vehicle prices in Delhi are second lowest in the country, next to Gujarat now. And that's how we are seeing some conversion happening in Delhi in B2C space also. In B2B, Delhi announced a similar very bold policy that in a very short term, we will not allow operation of fuel-based commercial vehicles. And in phases, we will ensure that only electric vehicles are introduced in the commercial space in Delhi. So, but it hasn't happened till now. So I'm not saying mandating, but maybe even nudge, even a pressure would have done wonders in Delhi as another example, because it's short of China. We are not saying China here, but businesses cannot be allowed to pollute. Business cannot be allowed to create something which is not good for the environment. So from that point of view, if CNG can be used as a fuel, as mandated fuel, electric could have been used as a mandated fuel for commercial space at least. So what went wrong? Where did we stop in Delhi as far as this policy is concerned? And do we collectively think that this is one trigger which is important? And we are all talking of commercial here only, right? This is one trigger which is really missing, the important leg which is missing. And that will create the whole ecosystem, which will create enough volumes, which will create awareness, visibility, and the rest could follow. It need not be a long-term policy intervention. Once there are enough on the road, people get the TCO advantage, automatically people will start using. So what do you think is the message for example, for Delhi government here that we can give, Abhishek, that, well, guys, you've done wonders, but what about B2B?
Sure. In fact, I've been fortunate to work with Jasmine very closely. And there are three aspects we are working very closely with them. One is rolling out of that chicken and egg problem, right? So this, as far as my knowledge goes, this policy of incentivizing or slightly giving a nudge or mandating has not gone haywire. It's only that something is coming before that. So what is that something? So that something is what we are working on right now. As I speak, that public charging tender to create at least 10 such locations of 10 points each across Delhi. That was a bit delayed, maybe I'll say maybe 2-3 months delayed. Now it is done. We expect by October first week or so, we should have that thing ready, rolled out, as far as my knowledge goes. So once that thing is there, that B2B segment, the range anxiety thing will go. Second thing is, we the discoms here, what we are trying to do is we have rolled out a very transparent policy on our websites. It is there. Even the captive chargers, like for example, shared mobility, or maybe Swiggy, Zomato, these people who are owning the B2B, these fleets, they are applying to us saying that this is the place, and look, we are going to give you connectivity immediately. We're not waiting for like strengthening the grid, so that cycle is reduced, accelerate the cycle. So low hanging fruit. So we did that. We have our complete network ready, distribution transformer network, where the juice already is mapped on the Google Maps or MapmyIndia, for example. So that this is where you need your mobility requirement, and these are the 2, 3, 4 sources of power supply there, and this is the most appropriate. So that speed we are working on, we have already worked on basically all the 3 discoms here in Delhi. Third and the most important thing is the rollout of the private and semi-public charging network. You are at home, your office, your mall, maybe restaurant, hospitals, these semi-public places, and your homes basically. This is already on anvil. We have already received empanelment request, and that is also going to be rolled out very soon in this month. That's what. So what I'm trying to say here is the government is very aware of the need of nudge or mandating. But before mandating something, we have seen it wrong way. Like in e-rickshaw, what has happened is over a million, about say not a million, maybe about 4-5 lakhs of e-rickshaws applying. But there is no legal way to how to charge it. And we have seen the repercussions. We have rampant theft and safety issues are there. Even for the e-rickshaw themselves, they are not aware of it. So we don't want to create that. The idea is to create an infrastructure which is not very going to take very long. Demonstrate it. We have demonstration POCs also on the road. And then this mandating thing would come into play. That's what I wanted to submit.
Well, yes, to a certain extent, I agree that we can't do everything together, but many things can be done simultaneously. Otherwise, it could be a long-run affair. Sapna, I would like to have your views on any other possibility of, if not mandating, accelerated conversion, because I think otherwise we as a team are talking of finding a solution to range anxiety here, most of it, and connectivity to a certain extent, right? Range anxiety in different ways, like swapping or charging, and connectivity in terms of bettering than what otherwise are available. But do you think that there is another leg missing, if it's not mandating, for a quicker accelerated conversion? Because that's where everybody is hitching on. B2C will come when it comes. B2B is great to go because it makes economic sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what can policy do? What is a message we can give to Delhi government other than the message that Abhishek is trying to give, or saying that everything is going hunky-dory, to accelerate the conversion to B2B space?
Sure. So like Abhishek, we are also engaged with Delhi government in some way regarding these initiatives. So from the policy point of view, I understand mandate is not the most liked or popular way of encouraging people to buy or invest in an EV. But yeah, again, I'll come to that same point of how what can really encourage people to go towards e-mobility, and how can policy really help that? See, making the charge infrastructure available, there's a lot that government can do, and they have been trying, and there have been multiple initiatives, though a lot more has to be done. So that's where when we were engaged with Delhi government, the point that we were trying to make there is, or in fact, they were wanting to know how to do it is, how to identify the locations where the charge stations are to be put up. So let's say they decide to put up 100 charge stations or 50 charge stations. Or there are so many other agencies who are also planning to do the same. So how the decision is to be made? From that point of view, if we put the charge stations exactly at the place where the need is, where the initial demand that we see would be coming from, be it if you're talking about commercial vehicles, because that's what you were also mentioning some time back, that commercial organizations can actually be told to go with the to basically have some percentage of their fleet as EV vehicles. I mean, where these commercial organizations are, where these fleet owners are, because where they are and the kind of routes that they drive on most of the times, that is the route where the EV charge station have to be put up. That's where the infrastructure is required. And on that route, where the power is available, where the what kind of footfall is there, traffic analytics. So those kind of inputs can really help in coming up with a better planning by the government or better policies also around the EV adoption, I would say.
I think,
Yeah.
Mr. Gill, if I may,
Yeah,
sorry,
sure. Yeah,
I
please.
think one of the things we have to be a little bit considerate of as I listen to this conversation and other ones we are having as well is that I think there are macro issues and there are micro issues. There are, for example, Sapna is talking about the network planning bits, etc. I think we have to be careful that we don't expect the government to do everything. Because they can't. And what will happen in the process is that the resource will get spread too thinly as a result, and we'll end up doing a bit of everything, but nothing will happen really well. And I therefore think it's important for a government to really think about where it is that they can have the largest impact, right? Which is perhaps in policies or mandates or whatever have you, and where it is that commercial or private entities, private enterprise can step in and is probably best placed to create the right solution. So, as an example, Abhishek talked about the tender for the 100 locations, creating real estate access. That's great. Create that access, but then let individuals, like private enterprises, etc., find the right solutions to deliver the energy through those locations, etc. So, I don't personally ascribe to the view that government has to do everything. Frankly, that they have to help us do the network planning. They have to help us build all the infrastructure. They have to have the app to route the traffic to the charging stations, etc., etc. Because all of that, once you've built it, then has to also be maintained and improved. And you will have limited resource at some point in time. So where do you focus that resource? That's a challenge that government will have. And so I think it's important to create that clarity of where government can create real impact and where private enterprise can create real impact, and then move on with it rather than everyone's trying to do a bit of everything. I think that'll create chaos and not a great customer experience, to Abhishek's point earlier on. Sorry, Sapna, you were saying?
No, not at all. And that's perhaps what I was sort of leading to, because we can't bleed the government, or we can't expect the government to keep on propping business. And when the prop goes off, the business tapers down. That will be unhealthy. And that's why I was hinting to more of nudging and mandating, which is not costing any money. And another idea that perhaps can work wonders for an individual conversion is the guy who's spending 25,000 rupees, he can't afford to spend 60,000 today, even after subsidy, on a product. So, can there be some sort of financing through the government, not by their own coffers, but by catalyzing some yojana, like we had Pradhan Mantri Yojana, there could be like Daily Chief Minister Yojana or whatever, which just ensures that capital is available without too much of credit checks, but with some sort of a backups. So that is also not costing a lot of money. So on policy fronts, we should always, like you're rightly saying, we should talk of less and less of drain on the resources, more and more of innovative thinking. But my views are always accelerated conversion. Otherwise, it will get dispersed. If it happens in 4 years, nothing will happen. If it happens in 2 years, many things will happen. Because if B2B space is in Delhi, for example, or rest of the country, has enough density of vehicles on the road, others will watch that and see, oh, these bikes are running every day, or these three-wheelers are running so much, and yet they are making good business in sort of it. The others will start buying. So from chicken and egg story, it's always good to accelerate the matter and do this conversion in a short-term period of time. So I don't believe sequentially we have been doing for last 6 years in FAME 1, FAME 2, and state policies and so many other things. So my take on this is less money, more innovativeness. But back to our businesses now. We are all in businessmen. Abhishek and Sujay, again, like there are three things here. One is swapping, another is fast charging, third one is normal charging, right? Rapid charging, swapping, and normal charging infrastructure. And the fourth one is vehicles with batteries, which any OEM is today doing. Now, a normal charging for a B2B, how does it make sense? Because his route is almost fixed. And he doesn't have time during the day to stop for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to recharge the vehicle. It's only during the night when the job is over, he would leave the vehicle and then gets charged. So except range anxiety or opportunity charging, is swapping is the only answer? Or if you're doing swapping, then is the fast emerging rapid charging a competition to you, Sujay? And in that process, because I believe, let me again come back to you as a critique, you are into an asset which is dwindling, which is going down because of technology. 3 years later, the batteries are going to be much cheaper. They are going to be different technology, right? And perhaps the asset you own now will be hugely depreciated by that time. Versus fast charging, which is fastly emerging. And just last week, we got the news that even phosphate batteries can be fast charged now. And there is a huge shift over to even basic technologies like LFP being fast charged. So what do you think about the business as such? Like same thing question would be on to Abhishek, starting with Sujay, that do you not always keep in mind these type of things? And are you on right track? Do you have chosen the right stage for supporting B2B, B2C through a swapping mode? I mean, in the world wherever we have tried, there are very limited successes.
So I think, look, technology in this space will continue to evolve, Mr. Gill. It's not, the whole EV industry globally, not just in India, is in its nascency in many ways, right? I mean, for all the, I'm sure there's colleagues from Tesla perhaps on this call, but for all the noise that Tesla makes, how many cars do they sell, every quarter? I think today it's about 500,000 or to 1 million cars a quarter. So it's not that many vehicles today. Point being, it's in its nascency. The technology will evolve. I think there are lots of battery technologies out there. Lots of people are experimenting with new ones. BP, for example, has an investment in StoreDot, which is an Israeli company that does fast charging, etc. But then the question that comes in, especially in the context of India, is what is the economics of all of these solutions, right? And to your point on a B2B customer, if that is where the transition first happens, what makes sense for that B2B customer? What are the economic points that you can hit for that customer, both from an OEM perspective and from an energy perspective? And so it appears that from that context, lithium-ion based swapping at this point in time seems to be a viable solution. I think, is there a risk to it through fast charging? Yes, it is. Will that fast charging work? Is it economic? And is there risk to it also from battery technology? There are all these questions that are out there. I think we and the industry, global industry, will gradually resolve on them. but I'm not sure that some of these are here in the next couple of years in an economic manner. Yeah, so it will evolve, and at some point in time, I'm sure they will be economical. That will really be the question, and that is what will determine whether we move away from swapping to fixed charging. At the moment, swapping in both Taiwan, which I think folks from the Gogoro team have done an excellent job with that in Taiwan. But if you look also in China at some of the companies, Motor and some others that are doing this, I think they're quite successfully done swapping and they're monetizing swapping. So I don't think that it's a passing phase per se. But yes, I think to your point, risks to it exist, and so the question is, how do you not overcapitalize any investment in any such business, such that you're left with a stranded capital at the end of it? That will remain a question and be a question for industry participants to answer. Abhishek, your views?
Yep, Abhishek.
Sure. Taking forward from you, obviously, I mean, technology is ever changing. If it is not changing, it's not a technology. So the famous Samsung case we used to study in the MBA's programs, basically. So Samsung was caught in a dilemma as to whether to divest with a complete range of memory chips. Okay. So memory chips, as you know, is the fastest growing industry, and also deprecating in a sense, like a 64-bit microprocessor is getting older in a year or so. It's a fast, rapid changing technology. Similar kind of things going to happen in EV space also. But I take a step backward. I say that, okay, what is that B2B guy daily range requirement? Forget about EV or IC engine vehicle, CNG or petrol, diesel, whatever it is. What is the range requirement today? So as Mr. Gill talked about, that once he starts in the morning and then he comes back in the night, in between he could have a lunch break or something like that. So entire complete round trip, what is the number of kilometers that the vehicle is making? If we have a vehicle, electric vehicle, which is giving exactly the same thing or slightly more, then this range anxiety thing will go away. He can do opportunity battery swapping or opportunity charging, whatever it is, whenever he or she is having her lunch, maybe half an hour or so. Then the entire thing goes up. Why I'm saying this is because we had a survey done during 2019 and 2020 of these B2B people also. They said that it's immaterial to me whether my vehicle is driven by a battery or a diesel or petrol or CNG, whatever it is. All that matters to me is it should mean least disruption to my day-to-day commute. So if you are able to innovate in the product space, say for example, a 1.34 kilowatt hour battery two-wheeler, I remember from some data, is offering 100 kilometers. Now, if that B2B guy is traveling 100 kilometers a day, or maybe 80 kilometers a day, this 100-kilometer vehicle is perfectly fine on actual road condition if it is giving in a single charge. And then he comes back to his place and puts on the charge. So we have to innovate on the product space also, see how more things can be derived out of the same battery size. That means more kilometer per kilowatt hour of the battery size. That innovation needs to be in place. And if we start saying to that consumer, again coming back to the same question, look, you are not going to be hassled by this technology. Don't get confused. You are driving today 100 kilometers, for example. This vehicle will give you 100 kilometers till the time you get back to your office or your home. You don't have to search for any swapping station or this and that. Unless and until there is urgent need, you take a detour on a single day. Maybe that fine day you would have to travel 150 kilometers, for example, as an exception. So if we are innovating in that space and start with the basics, probably we can convert her. That's my take.
Yeah, you're very right, Abhishek and Sujay, that this is not a complete solution we are offering, right? We are talking of one leg of the problem, which is to do with range anxiety, and there are multiple ways to solve it. And we are still to evolve out of rapid charging, swapping, charging, or vehicles with higher range. And we're all trying to fight out. And in times to come, perhaps when batteries prices go down, this problem will be less of a problem because the batteries within the vehicle themselves would be affordable and having long range enough. So perhaps in 3 to 4 years' time, it would be a different thing. But if you have to populate between now and then, how do we create our own businesses which are on sound footing and which are not depreciating very fast and yet be value added to the B2B space, right? But now coming back to fleet operators. my personal view is, and again, a critique's view is that these intermediaries have a short life, because fleet operators are doing what? They're trying to get the vehicles from OEMs because individual is not buying. So try and extract the best discounts out of OEMs, try to have back-to-back warranties with them. Then they try to get a financer on board because most of them are startups. So that cost of money comes on to them. And then they supply these vehicles with or without drivers to DSPs, maybe Amazon DSP or somebody. And then DSP runs it, thinking that he has nothing to do with the vehicle, but he will just pay to this fleet operator some monthly charges, etc. But on the other side, on the petrol side, there's nothing like this. On the petrol side, a DSP or a consumer, ultimately, there are these drivers with vehicles who are queuing up every day for a job. And they have a selection of people to say, I don't want to take you, I want to take you. So between the two choices, for an ultimate like an Amazon or his DSP or a Flipkart, etc., it's a multi-layered operation far away from OEMs. There are 3 layers in between, right? So what is the personal view? Is fleet operator a business for B2B in future? Or is it a gap filler till the time the vehicles get attractive enough, have batteries with range enough? So if these two things happen, if the vehicles get populated and individuals start buying, and the range becomes enough and the battery sizes and costs become low, everybody's business over here, sitting here, will be short-lived to a certain extent. And the OEMs will have a direct contact, perhaps, with that individual and the B2B space. So what about the fleet operators?
If you ask me, I think there is room for both. There will be both. There will be, there will be fleet operators who will come, and there will be fleet operators who will go. A couple of them will probably, a few of them, I don't know how many, maybe a handful, maybe more, will scale up and become, today they are startups, they will become bigger companies, maybe big companies. And then I think there will also be an evolution of the supply chains for the companies themselves, where, they will have their own mandates. I'm sure, I think Amazon has at least globally, they have mandates on electrification because of the push to address issues around climate change. I don't know about Flipkart, but I think Walmart will probably have those as well as the owner. So I think, again, to answer your question, I think companies will themselves have to take certain actions. Maybe today they are willing or unwilling. I don't know. It depends on the individual company. But there is more and more corporate focus on the green agenda. And so therefore, through their own operations, either what they're doing or through facilitating a fleet operator to get to scale so that they become reliable, I think there will be space for both. I agree with you that fleet operators today probably carry some risks. I mean, my perception is that companies tend to want to push all the risk. Corporates want to push all the risk onto the fleet operator, that you bring me the EV, I'm a big corporate here, so why don't you want to do the business with me? Of course, which works to a certain extent. But I agree with you, Mr. Gill, that if the fleet operator can't make money, at some point in time, he's going to say, thank you very much. I'm not going to keep burning my cash or some other high net worth individual's cash, and I'm going to have to pack this up. So there will be some shakeout of that. I think corporates will also have to get to that realization themselves, that they can't just keep pushing the fleet operator. So that is all part of this, the learning of this this business that we are in. But going back to your question that you asked, I think there will be room for both. I think there will be room for fleet operators, and I think corporates, because of their own green agendas, etc., will also have to act. If not now, very soon, because many of these big corporates, whether it's the Hindustan Levers or the Amazons, etc., have parent companies that have made commitments on electrification or otherwise, for that matter.
Right. Well, with 10 minutes to go, perhaps it's time to sort of summarize a few of the things that we have been talking. And I think, just to summarize, the first thing that comes to mind is, like you were saying, the ambition or the vision and the willpower of the ultimate consumer, the big guys, to convert to green. If it doesn't happen, nothing would happen. So more Amazon type of missions or more people thinking and announcing their statements of electric vehicles would set the ball rolling, at least in direct pressures, is one. Second is in order to accelerate what we are doing in a short time, so whatever is the sort of country's vision of converting to electric hugely into B2B space, there are some sort of less financial stimulus that still needs to become from policy side, and they can be innovatively done so that there could be a catalyst of conversion. Third point is, like you said, that government cannot do everything as far as charging, as far as infra, as far as the solutions are concerned. Businesses have to evolve and support this, or otherwise make a sense out of it, and not really always look up to the government for creating a public support system for that. So therefore, innovative businesses have to emerge, whether they are short-lived or whether they'll evolve, whether they will evolve with technology or time, that time will tell. But right now, there's a space for some sort of a range anxiety to be taken care of, whether it is opportunity or otherwise, and some sort of like even good connectivity at the back end to have smart connected vehicles so that efficiency sets in. And in order to do it more, perhaps the integration onto the vehicle itself about the diagnostics of vehicles and taking care of the problems of the vehicle also could be an extension of the connectivity part of it. And to attract that one individual who is going to ultimately buy, or as a service provider, it will be coexisting, right? So the lasting thoughts, the takeaways, we can now sort of summarize, starting with Sapna. The top two things that come to your mind that should be done in the next 6 months, maybe one from the policy and one from the businesses, that would perhaps accelerate it, because the figures are not really encouraging in B2B for the last few months. What we had imagined or thought, it is too early to say so, but the expectations are much more. So what do you think the next 6 months the policy should do, the businesses should do, to put on the fast track this type of a B2B conversion?
I think I'll go first. I guess we're not rushing to the door here. So I think one of the things that we need to do, or collectively is, or that government can do, is I think make real estate accessible for putting charging infrastructure in whatever structure that real estate comes in. I don't know, whether it's through a tender, whether it's through some other means, I don't know. But I think creating the real estate access is important, because that's probably, especially in dense urban areas like Delhi, where real estate is at a premium. I mean, getting access to the real estate is pretty key, whether it's for swapping or charging. I think the other thing, my perception is we talked about swapping and charging. I think getting the EV tariffs, etc., is still a complicated process. And I realize here that I'm coming at it maybe from a Western context as well. So maybe the way the government sees it is it's very simplistic, etc. But I just talk to my guys and I see what it takes to get an EV tariff application through the process. If it involves swapping, for example, and not charging, etc., to me it's like super complicated. So and again, so if we can make these processes that create the infrastructure, create access to the infrastructure simpler, then I think it will benefit everybody. So creating more open access on real estate and reducing the bureaucracy, I think, on EV tariffs, EV connections, etc., electricity connections, etc. I think those are two critical things that the government can help us with. I think what business can then do is, absolutely you're right. I think businesses, generally corporates, and again, the demand has to be there. Mr. Gill, to the question you asked. So I think what corporates can do is help folks like us, infrastructure player like us, who want to be in the business by adopting more EVs. The TCO benefits, as Abhishek said, exist. I think corporates need to make more of a push into electrification. I think corporates may turn around and say, well, the quality of the products, etc., are not there. So then that brings us to the third piece, which is yourselves, OEMs and others need to then have the right quality of products for those corporates. But I think that's what the private entrepreneurial ecosystem can do, is have the right quality products at the right price points and create the right adoption from the demand partners. And what the government can do, make the real estate accessible and make the tariff process, etc., more feasible and quicker. That's my viewpoint and perspective.
Well said. Sapna?
Yeah. So from the policy point of view, I will totally agree with what Sujoy said. If the real estate can be made available to the charge station infrastructure companies, that can really help accelerate the entire process. There have been several RFPs, several tenders that have been floating around for setting up of these charge stations, and we have seen that there is a lot of resistance by the various applicants to go in and to make those investments, because there is no clarity on the whole business model, the business structure, what is it that the government is going to put in or not put in. So there are a lot of gaps there. If they can clarify that can really help speed up this whole process. Second, from the business point of view, we definitely need to figure out ways to make the whole product more affordable to the customers. I know there have been challenges, but that's what whatever the industry together can do to make it more affordable and make it more usable also by the individuals. So ease of use would really drive the adoption of the EV. And from that perspective, from the technology space, I would say again that ease of use can be driven by giving that technology also in the hands of users to be able to manage and their vehicles better, and also to be able to identify the charge station infrastructure better. Because the anxiety that people don't have while using an IC vehicle, that's the kind of environment that we need to give to these consumers as well. I think that's from my end.
Yeah. Yes, closing remarks, Abhishek.
One thing is, of course, the government policy, what is there in place, needs to be assimilated and understood by the different stakeholders, including corporates. So there could be more interactions like these we are having today, so that anything about EV tariff or how this is determined, for example, how connectivity is given, those basic understandings. For example, if you go to the nuts and bolts and the transformers, lines, etc., how they are done. And we'll agree that power is not a problem, but the asset, the carriage is a problem. That Delhi being very, very dense, it's physically impossible many a times to augment a transformer in a particular busy area. So this kind of understanding, if it is made between the end user and the government and the discoms, that problem of EV not getting rolled out or those miscommunications or delays can be ruled out immediately. We are having these discussions and we are learning, both ESL, us, now I think Geo is also coming up. There are multiple other agencies. That is one, close coordination between the agencies and rolling out of the SOPs upfront on the website. That is already done in case of Delhi, for example. The business users, what they can do, you do is, please apply. Like in case of Delhi, there's no demand charges on the EV tariff. So, okay, what we have seen is people are asking for, give me 200 kilowatt, 300 kilowatt or something like that. And they're sitting on it, not using it. Mm-hmm. So this will, give a signal to the regulator here in Delhi that's, okay, let's impose the fixed charges. And that I personally am also not in favor of, because that will, disincentivize this sector. So let's be, my only request would be the business corporate should do professional planning. Maybe they can take help of infrastructure planners like Sujoy is here, for example. Sujoy is here, or they do proper planning. And then only they come forward to apply for certain connectivity. So these are the two takeaways from my side.
Well, thank you, panelists, for very engrossing and very intuitive discussion. I'll close the session with just one remark that we are all in this business of electric vehicles with one thought, which is one passion and a social cause, which is something when we are making money or losing less money, there is another cause behind it, that we are doing something for the society, for the country, and that's a great thought. And if we keep that in mind, the businesses and the sentiments would go together in a long way. And any business which is standing on serving the society, serving the country, serving the environment will never fail. It'll be painful, but it'll be successful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And with this, we have the lineup for our next session already here. May I request the panelists to please switch on their camera, and Mr. Aditya Barlia, who is the moderator of the session. Hi, Mr. Barlia. Hello, everyone. So very quickly, a warm welcome from CII for joining us at the second edition of the CII Delhi EV Summit. We had a very fruitful inaugural session and also the session one, which ended just now. So before I hand it over to our moderator, our immediate past chairman, Mr. Aditya Barlia, the co-promoter of APJ Satya University, I'll just take a quick round of introduction to our guest panelists who have joined us. So Mr. Aditya Barlia needs no introduction. He is very well versed in CII, he's the current immediate past chair of CII Delhi. This year only he stepped down, but he's as a mentor, he's always there for us and a subject expert. We have Mr. Abhishek Saxena. Good morning. He is the consultant at Niti Aayog, and he is well versed with this subject, as well as he is the key person in the policy advocacy part, and he plays a very important role when it comes from the central government perspective about the policy on the EV part. So thank you for joining us. We have Mr. Samudrala, the president, New Energy from Amaraja New Batteries Limited. So very good morning. So the Amaraja battery is the leader in the batteries, and currently the battery plays a very important role as a stakeholder when it comes to the EV part. So sir will get a very the perspective from the battery fraternity. Mr. BC Datta will be joining a bit late. There is a clash of time. So he will be joining maybe 10-15 minutes. He has apologized for that, but he'll join us. But he's the Vice President Corporate Affairs from Ola Electric. Mr. Satyam Kumar, thank you for joining. He's the CEO and co-founder of Loan Tap. The finance part of this segment of EV, Mr. Kumar will be covering more about it. And we also have Mr. Yuvraj Sarda. He's the head strategy in Sun Mobility. Unfortunately, Mr. Mani could not join, so Mr. Yuvraj is representing Sun Mobility. So over to you, Mr. Barlia. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to all of our audience, and my deepest gratitude for our wonderful panelists for coming in today. This is an absolute timely and wonderful topic. We've seen in the first part of conferences how EV is transforming the world. Our last panel moderator did a very nice thing by saying this is not just in many ways a new business or a new startup or something that is just coming up, but rather I think all of us feel a sense of social responsibility, that somewhere we are really helping the planet, we are helping communities, and we are helping ecosystems. And particularly in India, where we have such a large population, where we have such major issues with air pollution and all sorts of other downstream effects, moving to an EV economy is something that has been prioritized not only by our government, but also by all of our responsible corporate leaders. There is, of course, the international EV 30 at 30 challenge, where by 2030, we hope 30% of all vehicles, all systems used do move to electric. Now, this will, of course, is easier said than done. But I'm heartened that we have come through a long journey. If you look at 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we had electrical vehicles there, but there was no charging infrastructure. There was very poor understanding by consumers and businesses on what was the total cost of ownership. There was a huge problem in terms of service, maintenance, batteries, and such. And what we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years is a robust ecosystem that has emerged. The very fact today that we can do a conference where we have multiple panels, so many leading players, is a testament to how the entire ecosystem has truly evolved and gives us great hopes to what we can accomplish together in the next 5 to 10 years. I think our panel is really going to focus, and it's titled on unpacking the infrastructure package. What are the critical minerals, batteries, and supply chain priorities? Because one, of course, is trying to convince end consumers, businesses, and other key stakeholders to buy electric vehicles. But we can't achieve cost, scalability, distribution unless we have the back end side, all the critical parts of the ecosystem fully running and, of course, fully supported. I'm delighted to see our panel comes from a wide variety, from the government, from the batteries, from the ecosystems in terms of electrical vehicles, as well as mobility platforms, from an infrastructure loans and systems as well, and of course from very traditional old school EV side as well. Thank you all for being here. I think we have a decent amount of time with us. I think almost an hour. Would love to get at least 2 rounds of questions to each panelist. So I would request if you could keep your initial remarks to maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll circle back for some questions. If I could first request Sri Abhishek Sinha, Consultant Niti Aayog. Sir, would love to understand the government's perspective, particularly on how it's looking at really building and supporting infrastructure. I think the government and certainly Niti Aayog has taken a very strong pro-electrical vehicle stance with a numerous number of policies, incentives, and support. Would love to get updates, would love to get an in-depth understanding on the ecosystem and infrastructure piece. Over to you, Ji.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Berlia, and thank you, CII, for holding this wonderful conference at a very opportune time. There can be no better time for this conference because, what we have seen in the last couple of months is a huge uptake of electric vehicles in the Indian EV ecosystem. So I was just checking the FAME numbers a couple of days back, and what has happened is since the remodeling of FAME 2, that happened somewhere around June. So our monthly sales of EV two-wheelers have actually tripled. So that is the number that we are seeing, and we're seeing a lot of investments coming from private sector and foreign investments coming from different entities at different points of time. Along with this, EESL has already placed an order for 1 lakh electric three-wheelers, and they'll soon place an order for more than that is what we are expecting at this point of time. This is huge in terms of three-wheeler market that we are talking about. So the three-wheeler market in itself is only 6 lakh vehicles per year. So a government firm placing an order of the 1/6 the annual sales of a vehicle category, that's a huge disruption that we're talking about. Along with that, we'll soon see something on the electric bus. Again, an order being placed by EESL that is in the offing, and that you'll see in the coming months, and we hope to see it very soon. See, the idea of electric vehicles has been in the offering for a long period of time, and it's so I was part of a lot of conversations that used to take place around a year back, and inevitably the first question used to come was why EVs. So I had to start from square one. Now the questions are coming in the finer nuances of it. So for me, that's a very satisfaction from my end, and seeing that the discourse has evolved and how it has actually managed to change the whole ecosystem as a whole. So
I think coming back to your question on the EV infrastructure part and the ecosystem part of it, I think we need to look at infrastructure from a very granular detail perspective. See, why I'm saying that is Indian vehicle space is not very similar to the of the very disaggregated. You have a lot of vehicle segments which are two-wheelers, which are three-wheelers, which are four-wheelers, and there are buses to cater to. So the idea is, to start with, and you've asked me to get my initial remarks as short one. I think we need to look at a composite model of EV charging infrastructure that we have to come up with. We need to have battery swapping. We need to have plug and play kind of a model. We need to have fixed charging infrastructure. And keep in mind that the fixed charging infrastructure would be different for different vehicle segments. It will be different for two-wheelers, it will be different for three-wheelers, it will be very different for buses. So you'll not have a homogeneous kind of a charging infrastructure like you see in Western countries, which is primarily aimed at cars. So I think we need to look at those granular details, and I think it is important that a composite model of public and private investments happening simultaneously take place, and both go hand in hand. So I'll reserve my further remarks for the next intervention. Thank you.
Mishilji, thank you for those very short intro remarks. I have a few follow-up questions, which I'll come back to you on and really try to understand a little bit more about this ecosystem. If I could get Shri Samudrala, President, New Energy, Amaraja Battery Limited. Sir, your firm has been a well-known player and a leading player in traditional batteries for years in India. And of course, you have a deep understanding of the ecosystem. Many people usually see the at least earlier. I think that's changed in the last 5 years. The weakest link in the story was batteries, and because in terms of range anxiety, how do you convince people to really go for it? So, sir, would love to get your remarks on understanding how the battery ecosystem has changed. Abhishek ji had mentioned, of course, battery swapping and other ideas. Where are we, and where do you see the challenges? I mean, part of the reason, and of course, there is a struggle in India from a strategic reason, is an issue with access to rare earth materials and other materials that go into the battery manufacturing. If you could speak a word on about how assured is our supply of that as well, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Berlia, and I'm very glad to be part of this panel representing multiple voices here. I was also listening to the previous panel discussion on how do we approach the market, who is our target customer, and how do we create or at least eliminate the bottlenecks on the demand creation. And as you rightly mentioned, the battery used to be considered as the weakest, but the most critical link. While probably the weakest adjective is getting diluted, the critical adjective is still getting further strengthened to make the EV become successful. The whole, the EV initiative get successful. Traditionally, the energy storage technologies have evolved over the long period, considering certain application demands on the energy storage devices. And hence, you've seen a very mature technology from the lead acid getting established in very many stationary applications and the mobility applications for a particular function. But when it comes to EV requirements, three critical aspects that the battery is expected to serve, at least three of them, is to make sure that the battery is as light as it can be and is able to get charged as fast as it can be and to survive as long as it can. I think if you can combine all these three functional requirements into the battery technology, it would serve the needs of a e-mobility application requirement. And we've seen over the years, at least last 15 years, lithium evolving as a preferred choice. But to define the battery technology using lithium as a single word is probably simplifying it too much, because even within the lithium technology, you have multiple chemistries at play. And in our internal training programs, we do look at the periodic table, and one way to compare is how many of those elements are, playing a role in traditional battery technologies, and then look at some of the emerging battery technologies. I think you talk about as many elements, more than half of the elements on a periodic table are at play when you talk about the evolving advanced battery chemistry. So there is a reason why the ACC is called ACC, the Advanced Cell Chemistry, as far as the government PLI scheme is concerned. So I think from a technology progress perspective, I think India is definitely lagging in terms of deploying those technologies and being able to commercialize them in the Indian context. But I'm pretty confident that, like one of the speakers in the previous panel discussion did mention, globally there is a relatively nascent, status of various elements of EV markets, various elements of EV segment, and that's true even with the technology, because as you see, what we were hearing about 3 years ago in terms of technological landscape for the battery chemistry, and what we speak today is significantly different, whether you talk about the cathode chemistry, whether you talk about the anode chemistry, the electrolyte, recipes that are used, the separator technology that's used there. So a lot of things are dramatically changing. We've seen the pace of change being dramatic in digital space, but I think this is one area where even the material sciences are significantly evolving. And I think the challenges for people like us who are considering significant investment into the battery supply chain and battery manufacturing are twofold. One is, how do you get to the scale that makes you competitive enough globally? And second is about what kind of technologies are you betting on? And how agile are you to adapt if there is another disruption of technological change that's likely to come? So I would like to, in my initial remarks, summarize that there are at least 3 specific challenges that need to be dealt with. One is the choice of technology that you are looking at. The second one is about de-risking the supply chain related challenges based on which technology that you have adopted for. And of course, the third is navigate your capacity ramp up calibrated very closely with the demand related growth in this country. While all these 3 can be looked at independently, I think we also have to look at what India needs from a mobility solution would probably be having a very unique character. And it's unlikely that copy paste would help us to get the right solutions at an affordable pricing. So how intelligently are we able to adapt the technological know-how that we can access available elsewhere? But how do we deploy it to the context that the Indian mobility solution requires, whether it is the urban people movement or urban logistics or medium and long haul transportation needs.
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm going to come back on the supply chain risks in terms of accessing half a periodic table. In terms of manufacturing, I think that's always the one that's kept me up at night. I'd love to move to Sri Satyam Kumar. Sir, from what I understand, of course, Loan Tap has been doing wonderful things in all segments of the NBFC and lending. One of the features, bugs, criticisms, issues with EV has always been that the upfront cost of an EV system is usually higher than comparable, although within 1 or 2 years that you can see the total cost of ownership go down severely. That's always been a traditional hurdle for people to really invest in EV, both as a business and as consumers. Of course, those economics are changing rapidly, as we are getting economies of scale and such. But making sure that there is smooth finance, that they are specialized products that recognize the benefits of the EV market is essential. Would love to understand, sir, from your perspective, what's happening in that part of the ecosystem, and where you are seeing the greatest challenges, opportunities, and work being done, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Valia, and good afternoon, fellow panelists, and thanks to CII for having us hosting this session. On 2 counts. One, of course, we started lending in the electric 2-wheeler segment when the entire industry was still, questioning the model, questioning the whole residual value of the vehicle in a traditional banking parlance, and trying to mitigate the risks arising out of different situations, including that insurance not being available and all kind of challenges for the segment. So we looked at it in a very different fashion. We looked at it from a consumer perspective and not from a two-wheeler perspective. So we didn't try to solve it in a two-wheeler way. We tried to solve it in a consumer and a product way. So that's what we did. First, making the credit available, and then we expanded the mandate further to take it the accessibility itself across the country, because what we have seen EV adoption phenomena is very different than what is discussed in many of the forums, including domestic as well as a global forum. EV adoption currently also in India is happening more Hawaii way and less like a like a Tesla way in India. So it's not a top down; it's more of a bottom up. So the electric vehicles are being purchased in smaller cities as a percentage of purchases. It has already reached a substantial level, but in a larger city, as a percentage of purchases, it's still minuscule. So a dealer in Gurgaon is selling as many vehicles as a dealer in Patna. So you can understand the difference between the percentage penetration as far as the new vehicle sales are concerned. So it needs to be solved regionally. It needs to be solved locally. And what we have done is that we have moved beyond a single NBFC architecture to support it, to aggregate the regional NBFCs, provide them with a tech know-how of underwriting. At the same time, also make a seamless flow for customer data sets and the vehicle data sets or dealer data sets. Like a purchase order and all the stuff to the lending institution, so that all they have to do is that they have to assess it based on their risk and capital and not get into a much deeper detail. So that's some part which we have solved, and I believe that the banking and financial system will still stay ahead of the demand as far as credit, solving it for the credit is concerned, and particularly because the way the whole fintech is approaching the consumer ecosystem in India, or the credit ecosystem in India by the way of embedded finance or a marketplace finance, whichever way we want to say. So credit availability temporarily might look like a lag of about 3 to 6 quarters. That doesn't look to be a key roadblock as far as the end consumer is concerned. The supply chain side of the finance will take some more time to solve, but the end consumer credit availability as far as the ability to buy a vehicle or ability to own a vehicle is concerned does not have much of a lag, and it's getting solved. What we are grappling, and that's what we need to solve, and at the moment, I mean, to some extent, we have discussed in the panel, is standardization of the products. So the way the vehicles are mushrooming, okay, it's a very difficult to fund. Okay, so you have one or two large national level players where you have brand repute associated, and so you have been able to look at it, underwrite those kind of vehicles. But at the same time, it is getting assembled more like television in early 90s, or more like in any of those stuffs which we are assembling across the geographies in country. What it creates is a very unique challenge, the product performance itself. So the products are getting dumped also at the same time, while we are seeing the product are getting adopted, but because the demand all of a sudden has outpaced the supply, both because of the constraints on the supply side, and also because of situational, the government incentives at the same time also disincentivizing it, the traditional fuel cell or vehicle by the way of keeping the fuel prices itself at a much higher level than a normal consumer ecosystem. So naturally, the urban consumers' consciousness to cost is not, or a running cost, I would say, is not as high as that same consciousness is for a semi-urban or a rural consumer. The infrastructure challenges which we are talking doesn't exist there. Everyone can just take the vehicle to their home, pull up a wire and all. The challenges which is there is in terms of the fluctuation in the voltages, so leading to short circuiting and the battery not lasting till the projected period of use. So the challenges are at a standardization level. challenges are in awareness of right way of using it, right way of evaluating the vehicle. And if the challenges is going to be like this, very soon, the banking system is known to be credit averse in the Indian ecosystem. Very soon they will again leave the market even before the party starts. So that is what we are seeing on an individual consumer level in the Indian ecosystem. So as a group, as an industry body, we have a task to try and understand, standardize every part of it, including the cables that runs through the vehicle, including the controls, panels, and besides the battery itself. So we have been discussing batteries and all the stuff, but this is also much a requirement. And since we have a fellow panelist consulting Niti Aayog also, so I think lots of focus is like last panel also I was there. We discussed about the credit availability and all. My sense is that the credit availability will get solved much quicker and by the market forces. What will not be solved is the distortion in the product quality, which is emerging in every pockets. So that's something which is at an institutional body. We all have to ensure and take care so that there is a continuous supply of a credit. That's what is a key concern as far as lending institutions are concerned about availability of the insurance, how long the battery will last, how long the vehicle will last, and we have to try and standardize it for the organization to pick it up. Having said that, directionally, I also agree that as a country, we are large enough both in terms of consumer demand side as well as the weight that we carry in the global ecosystem. And we have to decide on a technology that we want to back and go with it based on our own capability of resource mobilization, because a long-term view for any investment institution for building those mega factories around the batteries or spending on those R&Ds for the technology and all is required to have a sustainable view of future. Maybe to an extent that MSP kind of ecosystem is required for people who are investing in the battery ecosystem, battery stuff, which is like half of the vehicle cost. So a lot has to be done on a structural part of the design. And I'm saying that we can
fully understand you.
Still a couple of quarters away from solving for a Tesla. We need to solve for for
Understood.
the rural ecosystem first.
Thank you so much. I would love to bring Mr. Sarda in. Now, Sun Mobility is, of course, trying to solve for a much larger part, almost as an electrical vehicle sort of infrastructure platform, doing everything from what I understand, batteries, charging stations, networks, docks, all of this thing. Yuvraj, would love to get your quick opening remarks and perspective on where you're seeing the state of infrastructure